you look at the first generation, which was like the original EQ, which was incredibly complicated. You could get drunk, and the more you drank, the more the screen blurred, and there was all these slash commands that let you do so many interesting things. And World of Warcraft came out, and it was a lot of that complexity was completely removed. And you know, I have a theory that that's one of the reasons why it grew so well in popularity, is because it simplified what I thought was a real heavy learning curve. But I think by simplifying that learning curve, the end game, the immersion lost something. What is your thoughts around that?
I think you can look at the arcade game Defender, and then you can look at R-Type. And Defender is, for the people who don't know, it came out in the late 70s, early 80s. It's a side-scrolling spaceship shooting game. And it's high on concept, and it's high on gameplay, but it was definitively built by someone who was obsessive about what they wanted to do, and it has a lot of buttons, and it's quite hard to control, and it's twitchy. And he tells this great story of when he built it and he burnt the data onto the chips to take it to the expo to try and get it picked up. They only had one copy. They tried really hard, the chips didn't work, there was an error, they managed to get they just about managed to get it working, and then it stood there with its attract mode. And all it did all day was have people come up, put a quarter in, and last about 7 seconds. And then their money was gone. And they just walked away baffled, not knowing what to do about it. But there was something compelling about that complexity, there was something engaging about that earliness, that actually made people go and play it again. Not only because it fitted the financial model, it burnt quarters really quickly, it made you put more money into it. And so Defender goes on to be immensely popular and makes a ton of money, and is a seminal game of its time. However, if you'd have carried on making Defenders, you just wouldn't have got anywhere, because that sort of high burn synapse, fast reaction gaming, it appeals to that first early adopter hardcore gamer. But then you compare it to something like R-Type, which came out 10 years later, which is this sort of multicolored spaceship, it's 2D, it moves around, it shoots at big alien baddies, it had a coin drop mechanism where a timer would tick down, you put more money in and continued, and you go, oh okay, well that's changed, that's simplified it. But it's also widened its market and hit a new market in new ways. To the point now that if you actually went to an arcade designer and you said, we're going to make Defender, we're going to use very simplistic, straightforward graphics with lots of buttons, and it's just going to be rock hard, people would go, you're insane. That won't sell. It'll sell to the nostalgia brigade who buy it to try and recover their childhood, but it's not going to sell to the modern era. So I think it's sort of like that you're always going to lament for what you see as the simplification, the opening to the masses of what you're doing. I'm sure the people who are doing mobile phones, when they were first building them, are very upset to find out that school children can now have them, that they're easy to do all these things that they struggled with, that people don't appreciate how lucky they are because now they've got address books and web browsers. We never had any of that technology. We had to make do with terrible little screens back in the day when the world was made of coal. And so I think it's sort of like that. We always lament for the perceived nostalgia, rose-tinted glasses. And when people say things like it's much too easy, I was looking at cars recently, and I thought about buying an old car, and I wandered off and I had a look at this 1940s car, the sort of car that gets been to a hot rod. And they're very interesting. And I went and had a look at this guy who was building into a hot rod. He'd lowered the roof and he was putting a big engine in. And he got in the car, and you have to adjust 20 things to get it started. You have to pump like fuel through, you have to change a chokey thing, you pull a lever, and then when you get it going, at any moment, any of these things can go wrong and the car will just stop working. And he said to me, I don't like modern cars. He said, I was in a car recently, it just had one button that you pressed and it just switched on every time. I like these cars, where at any moment the whole thing could just explode, and these cars take skill. These cars take, modern cars should be built like this. Well, I remember when they brought out a car, it had a key in it. Completely simplified it. I don't know why they bothered. So I think it's sort of like that. The march of technology, the march of people's time requires us to make things simpler. I'm drinking a can of Guinness Draft. Years ago, you got that by going to a pub, there was a barrel, there was a landlord, there was a big arm pump, you had to wait for it to settle. It took, 7 minutes of being in a pub to get your drink. Now, you have a can with a widget with some nitrogen, you can drink it straight away. Well, things are better now. I don't want to do it the other way, so I think it's like that.